Someone You Should Know, a program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sax, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sax.
Well, I welcome you to another episode of Someone You Should Know. I want to start off by saying thank you to all of you regular listeners and followers. The notes that you send and the emails that I get are very, very heartwarming, and I very much appreciate the fact that you enjoy this show and you look forward to following it each week. So I thank you very, very much. And part of the reason for that is our sponsor, and that is Christine Dean, who we affectionately know as the DFW Networking Diva. And she is a sponsor of this show. She is also the producer of this show. And one of the reasons that Christine is involved with this program is because she is an expert at what she does. She takes people's businesses, their websites, their marketing plans, and she elevates them to the next level. Reach out to Christine Dean if you have any questions about taking your business or media connections to the next level. Thank you very, very much, Christine, for all that you do for this show and for all of us. Today is going to be kind of a very interesting conversation because it is a subject that may not personally affect the majority of those of you that are watching and listening, but I would guess that it probably affects someone that you know, because we're going to be talking a little bit about blended families. We're going to be talking about step parenting. We're going to be talking about foster parenting. We're going to be talking about those things that seem to be growing in our society more than we even know. And to share that conversation is Debbie Ausburn, who is my very, very special guest. And I welcome you to the show, Debbie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
The first part of our conversation was when I started reading a little bit about you and what you do, is that we're talking about children. We're talking about foster children. We're talking about stepchildren and all. And you have no natural children of your own, do you?
No, I have no biological children. I've collected 7 children and 10 grandchildren, but none of them are biologically related to me.
So, what is the reason that Debbie Ausburn says, well, I haven't had any children of mine, so maybe I'm just going to go out and buy a bunch of pets, but instead you decide that maybe foster parenting would be an avenue to go into?
Well, part of it was my journey growing up. My parents were always heavily involved in youth ministries with our church and camping programs and that sort of thing. And so I grew up with a group of people who were concerned about, back then we called them at-risk children. And my mom worked in the juvenile justice detention center, and I did a lot of volunteer work there as I went through college. And when I graduated from college, I worked for a few years as a caseworker slash social worker with the juvenile court in one of the counties outside Atlanta. And I burned out. I got tired of dipping out the ocean with a teaspoon and I retreated to law school. But I never quite lost my passion and my concern for caring about and working with kids. And through all of my experiences, I realized the biggest problem that the kids I was working with had was the lack of a functional family. And I knew that because of my work as a social worker and my experiences helping my parents, I had a good chunk of skills to help one child at a time. I didn't have the emotional resources to help all 70, 80 kids on my caseload at a time, and government really can't care for kids the way individuals can. But I just saw the need, knew that I had at least a majority of the skills that I needed, not all of them. It's always a learning process. And I just felt the need to do something more than be a single person with 2 dogs.
What's interesting to me is you just said that you worked as a caseworker and had a load of cases, and you kind of burned out from that, and yet you must have seen something in all of that that said, wait a minute, this system is not quite working. And the was it the part that wasn't working was the parental aspect of that those children's lives.
Yes, nothing can replace a functioning family, and that is what most kids need and desperately want, and there is no substitute for it.
It, and that in itself is interesting because you mentioned the word functioning family.
Yes.
How do you determine, here's this child who has been battered in one way or another, physically or mentally or emotionally, and now you're going to put them into another situation. And how do you know that that is going to be a functional situation for them to live in?
Well, it may or may not. That's one of the problems with the foster system is you can't always vet foster parents from a system point of view. You really can't know what's in each individual's heart. I knew myself, and I knew what I had to offer to kids in a mentoring relationship. But that was one of the things I learned as a foster parent, and I carried that lesson with me when after I was a single foster parent and moved back home to my home state of Georgia. Um, Met and fell in love with a man with 5 kids. Only 2 were left at home. The other 3 were adults when I married him. But I understood from being a foster parent that foster
Oh,
parents and stepkids, I was not the person who was supposed to be in their life. If the world worked the way the kids wanted it to work, they would be in an intact family with both of their biological parents. And at best, I would be the nice next door neighbor lady who baked cookies and let them play with my dogs. Um, and the fact that I was in a parenting role was very hard for them. You know, their world was out of kilter. And here I was coming in and taking an adult role in their lives, and it just didn't feel right to them. And I had to give them room to grieve that loss and get used to the new reality.
well, and that situation could have been, arose either from the passing of the one parent or the divorce situation. But now you become the new mom in the household, and uh, this is a part that has always been very difficult for me to kind of understand and follow, and that is you don't have the parental right to scold these children, to tell them what to do and all. And do you find, and was it part of your situation, that they sometimes said, well, you're not my mother, so why are you
Oh
telling
yeah.
me that I have to do that? I don't have to do that. You're not my mother.
Oh yeah, that's very common. And the truth is I'm not their mother. I am an adult
Accepted.
authority figure in the house. I am a potential mentor, but I am not their mother. And I don't expect them to accept me. You know, they have biological parents, most of them. And the fact is I'm stepping into their history. There's a lot that I don't know that has gone down. There's a lot that I have to give allowances for. And so I had to learn to say, yes, I'm not your mother. I'm sorry your mother isn't here. But the house rules are X, Y, and Z. And as I learned from a very experienced foster parent and a mentor, what I had to learn to say was a variation on, I am really sorry you've had to go through this. And I understand, and I will try to be understanding, and the dishes still have to be done.
Good point. Very good point.
Yeah, I
The,
mean, part of our job is understanding, and the other half of it is providing structure because kids really, really need structure.
yeah, you know,
So,
and what can I do to earn your love and respect? Because we're both here together, and we're either going to be, locking horns, or we're
right.
going to find a way to get along with each other. And I want to know, instead of you being the authoritative figure, try to be the equal partner in the relationship. Am I correct?
Well, to some extent, equal partnership. I mean, I am still the adult, and
True. Right.
they're kids, and kids, you can never have an equal relationship with kids. They are never going to be grateful for what we're providing because kids aren't grateful. That's just it's a developmental thing. They don't really learn gratitude until their 20s. And actually, you don't really want them to because gratitude's a really rich diet, and it's too rich for someone to live on long term. So you have to learn to make a one-way commitment and be committed to these kids no matter what they give you in return. um, I would push back a little bit on what you said about I never felt the need to earn respect. I did need to earn their love and appreciation and build a relationship. But there's a certain and higher levels of respect, yes. But there's a certain base level of respect that I learned to insist on just as setting boundaries. You can't have a healthy relationship with anyone without healthy boundaries. And so with kids, just like other adults, you learn to say, okay, I can understand this, but one of my boundaries is, for example, I don't let anyone use profanity at me, directed at me. I don't care if they use it in a conversation when we're talking, but if we're arguing and they start using foul language and calling me names, then I've just learned to very quietly say, we'll continue this conversation later, and just withdraw. And I do not engage after that. And I always explained it to the kids when they were in a calmer position to learn to discuss it, that is just one of my boundaries and I'm not moving it. And guess what? They learned to discuss things without using profanity. So there are certain levels of things that I don't care whether they want to give it to me or not. I just insist on it. It's kind of like house rules, older kids don't get to draw on the walls. They don't get to burn the place down. There's just some
Right.
some basic standards that everyone has to learn to abide by, no matter how terrible their life has been. But you have to learn which standards they are and not to require too much from the kids. So it's always a balancing act between understanding where they're coming from and providing structure that they need and that's not negotiable.
Now, when you entered the relationship with your husband, you said he had how many children?
Five. The three older ones were adults by then, but all of us know you still end up parenting adult children to some degree. But
Yes,
the
sometimes they come back too.
right, right, yes,
All right, so three were grown and they were basically out of the nest. How old were the two that were still at home?
11 and 16.
Okay, so they were at a very tough, impressionable age, and this woman comes into the household, and they're kind of did you kind of get a feeling? See, you had an advantage because you had been working in this area, so you kind of knew. But did you ever get the feeling that they were learning how to play you?
Not really. I was fortunate. I had a good relationship with the kids, and because I didn't insist um, on having a relationship, I just sort of let them work at their own pace. And I understood by then. I understood teenagers. So the younger child and I bonded very, very quickly. The teenager took a little more time, and my my role when I first moved in was just to keep the refrigerator stocked and stay out of his room. I understood by then that teenagers are they're cave dwelling mammals, and they come out to forage every once in a while, and so I didn't take any of that personally. That's another thing that you learn is you just don't take things personally. And the younger one, actually, there was an incident. I opened my book with this story with my husband's ex-wife asked for custody of the kids, particularly the younger one, and we were trying to figure out. He had an opinion about how much resources we were going to spend on this, and he wasn't wanting to take sides, so he was really avoiding giving us an answer. And we didn't want him to take sides. We just didn't want to spend a whole lot of resources on something that he didn't want to happen. So my husband finally said to him, "Well, let me ask it this way. If you had a magic wand, what would your life look like?" And this child, we had bonded, we were close, we were good friends. He didn't hesitate. He said, "If I had a magic wand, you and mom would still be back together." And there was sort of long pause, and he got really concerned and looked at me and said, No insult, Debbie. You and the dogs would be right next door." And I didn't take that personally. He was just speaking a universal truth. If his world worked the way it was supposed to be, I would be the nice neighbor lady, but he and his mom and his dad would still be together. And that's just kind of the way kids are wired, and we have to not take it personally when they express that.
So is it fair to say that somebody that is going to get into a step parent position or a foster parent position, not advisable to go in with all your guns loaded and saying,
Yeah.
here's the ground rules, here's how it's going to be. It's a give and take in order to have a healthy relationship.
It is, and it's a little different with foster parenting and step parenting. There's a lot of overlap between foster parenting and step parenting. In step parenting, the one difference is there is one biological parent there, and as a step parent, you let the bio parent take the lead. You let them work on the relationship. You let them decide on the consequences. You work together with them on the house rules and you support them, but it is not your job to discipline somebody else's kids. Foster kids, you're particularly with me when I was a single person, I was the only one there. So there was no biological parent to defer to on the house rules. In some areas you defer to the biological parent, but house rules were my rules. So I learned to set minimum rules and, high nurture, um, necessary structure, but I had to make a difference between what the kid needed and what I wanted in house rules and structure. And that part, carried over to my marriage and step parent. But that was, kids were, my husband had custody. They were used to looking to him as the authority figure. So
Right.
my role was to support him, and as hard as that was for me as a type A independent personality, I had to do a lot of learning to let someone else take the lead with kids when by golly, I knew what I was doing. I could do it quite well. Thank you very much.
Well, for those that are watching and listening to this show, Debbie has written a book, and it's called "Raising Other People's Children." And if you are in a situation where you are a foster or a step parent, and all. It's a good read and a lot of helpful information. If you are not in that situation, but you maybe know somebody who is, uh, this might be a good option for you to suggest that they get a hold of the book, because I don't think that it's an easy position for people to put themselves in. You don't just say, "Oh, I think I'm going to become a foster parent," and all. It's something that you really need to, I think, research, understand the ups and downs and what's involved in it. And I think there's a lot of very valuable information in the book. And visit Debbie's website and all, because there's a lot of additional information on the website that you can gather too. Uh, having just said something about fostering, uh, for someone who says, you know what, we don't have children, or our children are grown and out of the house, but we still like that pitter patter of feet around the house. Maybe we should look into fostering. What are some of the bits of advice that you would give to people who are considering going into foster parenting?
My standard advice is to wade into it a little bit at a time. So start with I did this, and it worked out beautifully for me. Start as a respite parent. You don't have the kids 24/7. You just have them on the weekends, or while the foster parent needs a break, or sometimes, for example, a foster parent has to take other kids on college tours, or go out of town. And foster kids can't stay with neighbors, they can't stay with their friends' parents, they have to stay with someone who has been vetted and licensed. And so most agencies now have a respite program where you can be paired with a full-time foster family, and you can work with them on a particular child, and you have limited responsibility. And so that a gets you paired with someone who's a good mentor and more experienced, and B limits your responsibility, so you're not causing problems if you get in over your head. Then the next step that I took, and that is available, is to be a short-term emergency placement. I would I worked as a emergency placement, so that they bring kids in any time of night, and they could stay with me for up to 2 weeks while they were trying to find a permanent placement. Now, one problem that you sometimes have with agencies, unless you are really specific and really hit boundaries and enforce boundaries, is the agencies will just sort of have trouble finding a placement, and they'll slide from emergency care into long-term care, or they'll guilt you into keeping a kid when you hadn't really planned to. So, again, foundation of a good relationship is strong boundaries, even with agencies. So that is one thing you have to be careful of in that. The other thing that we're doing now is we have an empty nest, and our last long-term foster placement was very challenging and very draining and very difficult. So we decided to take a break, and we signed up though with an agency that has paired us with a child who has aged out of the foster system, who's a young adult, who's still in an independent living program, so we don't have to worry about placement, or having someone in our home, but we just provide them a family that they never connected with. And we're setting up adult relationships with them, and sort of blending them into the rest of the family for Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays. I didn't realize how many things we take for granted, until this particular child called and said, "I have to put down on this medical form the name of some adult to be called who's not related to me. Can I put you guys down for that?" So it's very valuable, very limited sort of commitment, So mentoring someone who doesn't need a place to live or is in college, but just needs that guidance and emotional connections that all young adults need is another really good alternative that I'm starting to highly recommend to people.
It's interesting. Number one, I never knew that there was this respite program that you mentioned earlier, that was available. The other aspect of mentoring an adult or an older person that was living on their own. I mean, it's like having that coach that you had on for football that stays with you and says, as you progress, I'm always here for you. And it's not just words; they do it in deed also. Uh, you mentioned a little bit earlier about someone who wants to go into a fostering program. They have to be vetted in order to get into the program. What is that process? How long is that process? What do they need to do to prepare for being a foster parent?
It depends on the agency. Now, there are a couple of different ways to do it. Most state agencies have their own program, and then there are a lot of nonprofit groups that partner with the state agencies and recruit and oversee foster parents. It adds that extra level of accountability, but it also adds and usually adds an extra level of support. And so I always encourage people, look first at nonprofit groups. There's any number of religious oriented groups that you can find one that fits your faith tradition, and then there are a lot of secular groups. Um, and if you don't find one that fits, then you can talk directly to the state agency. In my experience, it has always helped having that nonprofit layer. I get a caseworker who can help me advocate and work the system with the state caseworker. So, I mean, there's the added disadvantage of you have an extra person you have to deal with, but I just always found it more helpful than not. So you just talk to them, and they have different states and different agencies have different requirements, but usually at the minimum there is a criminal records check. You have to have um, you have to have references just like you would for a job. You often have to, well, you usually have to have someone come out and look at the home and see whether or not your home meets the
Right.
minimum requirements for, bedroom size and space and safety precautions and that sort of thing. And then there are varying levels of training and orientation programs and courses you have to go through with again it varies with the agency. Most states now require foster parents in order to keep their license up, they have to get so many hours of continuing education, which you can get in person or online, and there are a lot of groups out there that offer the online training for foster parents. It can range from 5 to 15 hours a year, again, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But those are the basic steps. There are some groups and states that are going to a uh, circle of care model where they have mentors, maybe people who are experienced foster parents who are taking a break in their season, but they mentor the younger foster parents. That is very effective. It's kind of a growing um, trend right now, but I honestly don't know how many states and how many organizations offer that. But that is certainly something to look for if you can find it.
Now, I'm sure that there's somebody that is watching or listening to this program right now that says, "Oh, well, that it's a great idea. I love that idea, but I'm not married, so I can't get into foster parenting." Are there options for single people, and are there
Oh, yeah.
additional requirements for someone who is single to become a foster parent?
No, there's no additional requirements. I will tell you from my experience that you need a robust safety net. As a married foster parent or step parent, you need to have your people. You need the support network. Self-care is an important part of doing this mission and this service. I will also say that, in one respect, having been a foster parent both as a married and single person, um, in many ways, being a married foster parent was easier because I did have that extra set of hands to handle things. But it also was harder in that, suddenly I had another adult whose opinion I had to take into account.
Right.
When I was single, it was just my decision, and then when I got married and I discovered this wonderful, caring, sympathetic man that I married didn't always agree with me, which was quite a shock, and I had to learn how to navigate that. So, it is a challenge as a single, parent, but if you have your safety net and if you have your people to support you, and I mean, understand, I had people who literally, I was in the middle of a trial because I was a trial lawyer at the time that, I was a criminal prosecutor at the time that I was a foster parent. I'm in the middle of a trial. I get a message from my foster daughter about, serious abdominal pains, and I could break into the trial, so I had to, ask for a break long enough to call one of my friends to say, "Can you take my daughter to the hospital and sit with her until I can get there?" Um, so you just have to have that network of people who will step up and help you out. But if you have that, then you can do it just as well as you can as a married person.
Debbie, you mentioned in the information that I read about you, you made a statement, and I want you to elaborate on it a little bit. You say that commitment is stronger than love, and some people might say, well, wait a minute, love is at the top of the list. And I'll explain what you mean when you say that commitment is stronger than love.
Well, love is very important, for establishing a relationship. But let's face it, we are human beings and we're fallible. And to take the analogy of those of us who are married, we all have been through days when we go to bed thinking, I don't know why I did this. I'm not sure that I like this person anymore. I don't think that this is, what I signed up for. But
Uh-huh. Yep.
okay, I said I would do it, so I will keep doing it and we'll talk again tomorrow. Um, so, in the sense that love is an emotion, you can't always love these kids. As a step parent, it's hard to love kids who are rejecting you, and it's hard to take on, obnoxious brats, and every kid has an obnoxious brat phase. And I'm experienced with teenagers. I love teenagers, but part of a teenager's job is to push back against adults and find their own space in the world. And they don't always know how to do it kindly and nicely. And it's hard to like them, much less love them during those times. And you just have to have a commitment that I am going to do this no matter whether we have a good relationship, no matter whether I am able to love them in this given moment. It is a sense of commitment that carries you through these dark times.
Yeah, and that's what I alluded to earlier in our conversation when I said, do these children look at you and determine, especially teenagers, how am I going to play this foster parent or this
Oh,
step parent?
kids instinctive, it's not even conscious, but they play the angles. They will find every avenue they can and every loophole that they possibly can. I mean, every child's a budding lawyer to some degree, and and that's just, it just goes with the territory. It's part of their development. And And to ask them to not do that, you might as well ask them to stop growing and stop breathing.
Right.
You just have to recognize that's part of it, and your job as an adult is to say, no, 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 I see this, and love you, care about you. We're not going there. Let's go somewhere else.
Would you recommend or suggest that young people who get married and they're maybe not quite ready for parenting, they're not sure if they want to have children or when they want to have children, that foster parenting might be a good early step because they may either love it or hate it and say, we don't want children of our own because you have your own biological children. You're committed. There's no, let's send them back. So is
Yeah.
foster parenting maybe an option for people
No, I I've worked with
to a
I've
degree?
worked in this field too long. I don't like the idea of kids as training wheels. And one of the hardest things that the foster system has to deal with is disrupted placements, because when a child moves from one home to the other, it just causes so much trauma and so many issues for them. And that's one of the biggest problems with foster placements is kids never settle into a relationship. They never feel like they belong because they're always at risk of being kicked out and sent somewhere else. So, no, I think if you're going to go into foster parenting, you need to make the same commitment to these kids that you would make to your biological kids, understanding that the state may rip them out of your home, that they may move into reunification. I mean, a big part of being a foster parent is loving and grieving. It's a tough cycle of loving and grieving, and it's a different skill set than with biological kids, because most of us, we don't, I mean, there are people who go through the tragedy of losing a biological child, but it rarely happens. And you're right. Most of us, when you get a biological child, you're stuck. But I I just if you're not going into foster parenting or step parenting with the same level of commitment that you would have for a biological child, then it is not going to be successful, and it will not teach you anything about being a parent.
It probably it may do more harm than good.
Oh, on both ends of the
But
relationship.
yeah, yeah. You talk also a quote that I saw. You talk about being a Plan B parent,
Yeah.
and what is a Plan B parent?
Well, it's what I said before. You're not the person who's supposed to be in the kid's life, but you are the person who is there. So, never apologize for being there. Um, it is what it is, and we all have to deal with the reality. And you add value to the relationship, even if the kids don't recognize it. So we have to be secure um, in our own contributions to the family and to the relationship. But we have to understand we are we are the kids' plan B. We are not the person they really want there. Um, and that's okay. Being a plan B parent can be pretty wonderful. I've spent my life being a plan B person, and I learned to be okay with that. All of the important relationships in my life, not with my siblings, but with my kids and my spouse, they came about because someone screwed up very badly somewhere along the line, and I've been the beneficiary of that. And that's perfectly fine. It is still a wonderful, solid, great relationship. And
Yeah,
it, and plan B is not second choice. There are there are a lot of, sometimes I joke, I married late in life because I had to wait for my husband to finish screwing up. So a lot of plan A decisions are very bad decisions, and you have to wait for people to realize that their plan B is the better plan. It doesn't work that way with kids. I mean, they're always going to be tied to their biological parents, no matter whether you think you're a better parent or not. So you you don't get into those popularity contests because you'll lose those. But you just understand that Plan B, and with parenting with kids, it's fine, and it can be strong and wonderful all by itself.
Folks, visit the website and all. And if you have questions, reach out. There's a contact button there so you can reach out if you've got a question for Debbie. The seven children that you raised and all, you still stay in touch with them? They stay in touch with you, and have they got families of their own? Have they paid it forward?
Most of them have. Two of the seven are not in contact with us, and that's one of the, as I said, being a foster step parent is a cycle of loving and grieving.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
yeah,
some kids can't overcome their trauma, and or they go places that you, as a parent, you say, I can't support you, can't go with you here. I love you. When you come back, you know where to find us. And that's the message that you send with them. We will be here, and you know where we are. And then you just wait for them to make their decisions. But with the others, we have a very strong, very good relationship. Um, you know, they are their own people. They make decisions, as every parent knows. Your adult kids make decisions where you're going, yeah, not sure that's going to work out for you, but mm, I hope I'm wrong, and and we will be here no matter what.
but you hope that when they turn out to be successes, you can kind of pat yourself on the back and say, I'm glad that I had a small part in making that happen.
Well, you can, and there is that tendency, but you just there is no success or failure in parenting. You just do the best you can, and then you turn them over to God and hope for the best. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a trial and error kind of a thing.
oh yeah, yes, yes, and
But
it's nice for us to I love to take credit where I can, but if I take credit for the good parts, then I have to take credit for the bad parts. So I prefer to
right.
not take credit for either. Just
Well,
do the best you can.
right. Debbie, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your story, to share this because uh, parenting, foster parenting, step parenting, is kind of a rough foundation, and I thank you for helping to kind of smooth that out and making people understand that it's not something to fear. It's something
No.
to look at and consider and maybe get involved in. I end my program every week by a quote from Walt Whitman when I say, "Be yourself because everyone else is already taken," and that is true. I think of the work that you are doing also, and I thank you very very much for being a part of this show.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Someone you should know.